Hey folks, welcome to a podcast about Catholic things. This is Eric, your ambassador of common sense, and I'm here with
Dan, your ambassador of nonsense. Welcome everyone. And
I have the beer.
Hey, before we get started, real quick, the beer of the week is Unveiled Brewing Double IPA. An IPA, I don't know if I went over this before in one of our podcasts, but an IPA is an India Pale Ale.
India?
So named India, yes. Well, some people call it Imperial, but it's actually the same thing. So the East India Shipping Company was the Imperial British shipping company that kind of was responsible for British commerce throughout the world. India because that's where they got a lot of their tea, and of course tea is very important to the Brits. And what would happen is that they would want to ship beer, and it would spoil on the ships. They didn't have refrigeration and that kind of stuff. However, they discovered that if they increased the amount of hops in beer, it preserved it better. Something about the oils in the hops kept it from spoiling. And so that became a pale ale that was hopped up with extra hops flavor. It gave it a lot more bitterness, but because of its use in shipping, it gained the name India Pale Ale or Imperial Pale Ale, since the East India Shipping Company was the imperial commercial arm of the British Empire.
Okay, because see, I never even knew what IPA meant, but I just knew that whenever someone said it's an IPA, that meant it was going to be,
nasty.
Yeah, to me.
Yeah, because you don't like the super bitter stuff,
right?
So, there's differences. I mean, I've seen them that are just slightly more bitter, and I've seen some that are very, very bitter. I'm not sure what this one is going to be. I haven't tasted it yet.
But the bitterness is there to help it ship in the heat.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. It's a result of the extra hops.
What's
the thing that I don't know about when they say double IPA, and I've asked a couple people this, and I even tried to look it up, and I could not come up with a satisfactory answer to me. So there's a beer called a double bock.
Yeah.
Or frequently called a doppelbock, or it could just be called a double. And of course, there's also a triple and a quadruple, but those get kind of nasty tasting. Yeah. So what I don't know is whether a double IPA is a sort of something that has features of a double, like a double bock and an IPA, which would be kind of like high hops, more balanced by more malty,
like more bitter. It's twice as bitter.
No, because the maltiness would add a sweetness to it that would kind of balance, like a breadiness to balance the bitterness. Or if it's just twice of what an IPA is. So I don't have a satisfactory answer for that yet. Some of my favorite IPAs are very bitter. I'm going to go ahead and take a taste here and see how I like this.
It's probably good that this is an IPA because I forgot to put it in the fridge this morning, and so I'm drinking a warm beer.
You're drinking a warm? Oh, okay.
I'm constantly doing that. I forget to put it away, and then it's time to record, and I'm like, oh man, now I got a warm beer.
Uh-oh.
Oh well.
Yeah.
It's not too bad. Well, see, I don't think it's all that.
Yeah, this isn't
worse.
This isn't a super
bit. Not cold.
But this is a little bit thicker than I think of an IPA. That's why I almost wonder whether double IPA might mean kind of IPA, but tending with some of the characteristics of a double bock.
Uh-huh.
So I don't know. I still have to do some research on that. But I actually kind of like this one. And it kind of bothers me that I like it so much now because it's actually brewed and bottled by a company called World Brew, which it kind of doesn't even count as a craft beer. It's World Brew is like a premium private label beer brewing, marketing, and distribution company. Kind of think of World Brew as like a record label compared to a group of guys that have a garage band that produce all their own music themselves and put it out on the internet. Okay, so
you
it's kind of,
are
but
a beer
not
snob,
quite,
and you
not,
feel bad
well,
for liking this beer because you're a beer snob.
Yeah, well, that's okay, but it's not quite like the like the Budweisers, which I don't know what I would compare them to in my analogy with the record labels. But anyway,
you know what Monty Python compares them to?
No, what?
Sex in a canoe.
Compare Budweiser to that?
Yeah. Well, all American beer.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I will.
Right, so
I will bleep out the word, but it's
okay.
It's close to water.
Oh, that's funny. I mean, I almost wonder if there's some kind of you know what a canoe party is?
A what?
A canoe party?
No.
Which, by the way, you should have one if you can ever get a hold of a canoe. But basically, a canoe party is you have a canoe, and you don't need to be near a lake or anything like that. Basically, you have a canoe, a full size canoe, and you 2/3 fill it with ice, and there's just all kinds of ice in it. And everybody who comes to the party has to bring some beer and stuff and stick it in the ice, and then everybody helps themselves during the day.
No, I don't have a canoe. But I am going to be having a party here, I believe, for the 4th of July.
Oh, that'll be cool.
And next week we're painting Dad's house.
I know. I've got it all lined up. So do you know... well, let's talk about that after our podcast's over.
Yeah. All right.
Okay. Hey, I need to I need to tell you this. So it kind of relates to a podcast you and Jason did a few weeks ago about sex.
Yeah.
And I don't, I to my shame, I haven't listened to the podcast yet, so I don't know whether you talked about custody of the eyes and habits of purity and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, a little bit.
But okay, so I was discussing with one of my boys about custody of the eyes and how important that is, and generally about purity and how much the visual can affect that and that kind of stuff. And my wife was there listening, and she said, okay, and she, after we were gone, she said, oh, that was a pretty good talk. I'm glad that you talked to those boys about that. I don't think boys get enough of that. So I was feeling pretty good, felt like I'd, done something right and got the approval of my wife and everything. So then later, we're driving somewhere, and we're stopped at a corner, and out of the blue, my wife says, how come you're not looking at that girl? I said, what? She said, you think she's hot, don't you?
See, they got you there. You got to watch out.
Yeah.
You're trapped in that kind of thing no matter what you do or no matter what you say. If you look, you like her. If you don't look, you like her. So it's like, whatever.
So anyway. So
what are we talking about today?
Topic of today. I would like to talk about something that has for a long time been kind of a struggle for me, not morally or anything like that, but conceptually. So, and I had always kind of prided myself on sort of being able to understand concepts, especially related to theology and philosophy and stuff. Of course, I'm not a philosopher and I'm not a theologian. I struggle when I read Thomas Aquinas because there's, I don't have the grounding. I haven't gone and studied in college to be able to even understand the vocabulary correctly and that kind of stuff. But one of the things that...
Did you just get a text from Jason?
Okay, let me see. I probably did. Hold on. I got some kind of a text.
Maybe he wants to join us.
See. Text message. Hey, what are you guys talking about? Okay, I'm going to say...
God.
The thing...
We're talking about Catholic things.
Yeah, about Catholic things. That's right. You idiot. That's what the podcast's about.
You should know.
And then
I'm not even home.
Stupid
He's not even home. Why is he texting us? All right, we can go on.
Okay, let's go on. So, anyway, I had kind of struggled conceptually with this idea of if God created all of time. So, because as a kid, they just say, oh, God has no beginning and no end. And you think in terms of, oh, okay, that means God's forever. That means, time was going on before God created the universe. And after the universe is done, time's going to still go on, and God's there all the time. And then it kind of, when you think of it that way, it begs the question, well, gee, what was God doing before he created the universe? Why did it take him so long? Because in theory, there was an infinite of time before, and there, and so forth. And I knew that wasn't the right, even the right way of thinking about it once I got to a certain age. It's like, okay, that's not exactly, it's not like there's a before. Okay, so time itself is something created by God, but I still struggled with that conceptually. What does that mean? That's, it's, it reminds me of the joke about the philosophy student that was asking, what was God doing before he created the universe? And the teacher answered, well, he was constructing extra levels of hell for impudent students like you. But no, the thing is, it took me a long time to understand the idea that God's act of creating the universe is I don't want to say constant, but an eternal act of God himself. And the clue that sort of put this into my mind in the right picture is something that came from Thomas Aquinas, which is, he said that God is simple. And when he says simple, he doesn't mean that there's no depth to God or whatever. We say that God is infinite. We also know that God is three persons, and Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Yeah. But the thing is that when he says God is simple, we mean that God's own existence is itself everything that there is about God. So, for example, God isn't this being that could have the attributes, say, of love, that is something distinct from God himself. We have that. So we are beings, and we can have love as something that we either experience or act upon, or whatever. Demonstrate, I guess, would be a better word. Exhibit. We can exhibit nobility. We can exhibit mercy, and so on and so forth. But these are not things that are assignable to God as properties. They are intrinsic to his very being. His existence is the same as his love, is the same as his mercy, is the same as his justice.
Okay. And one of the ways that I've always said that to people, and it probably not as good of a way that you just said it, but that when people talk about God having justice or having mercy, I would say God is the perfection of justice or mercy.
Right. It's he is the perfection of all those. It's not something he has in some measure. He is its very perfection. Exactly.
Right.
So the other thing that Aquinas says is that there is no potency in God. And potency, we mean unactualized power. So, capacity that, there's something that could be done that's waiting to be turned into act or reality, which is kind of funny because we use the word omnipotent or all powerful to describe God. The Latin of it is omnipotent, which kind of uses the word potency, or the Latin root for the word potency. But when we use that to describe God, he's all powerful. That means all that can be possible is in God, but all that can be possible in God is acted. It's actual and not potent in God, because God is pure act and there's no potency reserved in God. And so when we get onto that chain of God is love, is mercy. His being is the same as his love, is the same as his mercy, is the same as his justice. We continue on, is the same as his act of creation.
Okay.
And so the very act of being for God is also an act of creating for God. And therefore, creation is an eternal act of God, because he is eternally. Since he is eternally, he acts eternally in all things, and therefore he creates eternally. Now, that doesn't mean he creates perpetually, because perpetuity has to do with time. It doesn't mean that he, throughout some kind of infinite expanse of time is creating. It's just we use the word eternal now to describe it. It's a single act, kind of a singular act of everything from God in one eternal now, from which everything is.
But it's like it's part of his essence, the same way God is love, God is creation.
Mm-hmm. Right. God, not God is creation, but God is creator.
Okay.
Eternally, just as God is love eternally. That's, and in fact, that very act of creation is actually, St. Augustine would say, God is love eternally, and his act of creation is a eternal and a eternal component or of his love, I guess you would say. Not component's not the right word, but a eternal expression. Yes, that's a good word. Expression of his love. So the act of creation is an act of his love, since he is love eternally. He from eternity creates, and therefore all of our entire universe, the very beginning of time to the very end of time, whenever that's going to be, all of it in its totality is there in one single instant as an act of creation from the eternal now, in which there is no time. And that's the thing. In eternity, there's no time, so there's no transition from one state to another within eternity. There's not a transition from non-creation to creation or anything like that in eternity, and therefore, from eternity, from all eternity, God is in this act of creation, which holds the universe as, think of like the whole of time from the beginning to the end, all contained in one single ball, for example, suspended in the middle of a room. The whole thing is there and viewable from eternity, which is the room itself, for example.
Okay. So a couple things about that. First of all, when we die, we will not have that eternal existence the way God does. But
not in the way God does. No.
Will we still have time?
That's it. The things, most things that we can glean from scriptures implies that we will. However, there also seems to be, because we and both in scriptures and the teaching of the church, we know that we will enter into the beatific vision, which means we will see God as he is, which means in eternity.
Okay.
And so that's kind of, and yet at the same time, we see in scriptures this promise of a new heaven and a new earth. And so that kind of begs the question, well, if there's going to be a new earth, does that mean that time is going to, are we going to re-enter time? So we die, for example, and say our souls go to heaven. Well, then for us to receive our bodies back, our bodies will be glorified, but does that mean our bodies are going to be in eternity? Well, eternity, there's no change. There's no sequence of
right, that's what I'm thinking. I mean,
events or interactions, this, then this, then this, then this. In order for that to occur, there has that is time. That is non-eternal. And so that's kind of one of the things that I was going to sort of suggest in my analogy. It was going to be an extension of it, but a model where from, we die, our souls enter the beatific vision, and so now we see God as he is, and we know God in his eternity and in his divinity. So anyway, that's as we'll kind of see, in my analogy as I kind of propose it later. I think that there may be a point where, once having died, once having entered the beatific vision where we know God as he is, our bodies are resurrected and enter a new order of time. Now, it could be this very universe, this very time and space simply continues, and even continues forever, but in some way is transformed so that things like death and that kind of stuff no longer occur. And I think at that point, human generation will end as well.
Yeah.
So, the people won't be having babies or anything like that, which it would kind of be weird for people to have babies because, even, once we've died and then come back, Jesus even says that marriage doesn't, marriage is in this life and it ends at the end of this life. It doesn't continue the next world. So I don't, there's not going to be human generation. This is going to be the full body of we who live and die in the Lord. But whether it's in a continuation of this world that goes in perpetuity, or a new time and space that gets created, my thinking is that we may then go and exist in time, except here's the cool part. Now this isn't hinted in Scripture directly. It's just trying to reconcile various things that I'm coming up with this.
Yeah.
Okay? As we are in this new order of time, this new earth, we'll be going through that with an awareness of our presence in the eternity, in the beatific vision of God. So it's like, right now, for example, we actually, within the view of eternity, we are there with God. Those of us who are, destined to be with God, we're there. There's not a change of state from us not being there to us being there from an eternal point of view. We're there.
Okay, you're getting...
But we're not aware of it.
You're getting
close. But in the new order of time, we might be aware of it.
You're approaching the idea of predestination.
Yeah, and even the saints kind of struggled with this.
Mm-hmm.
And they had various. So let me propose my my analogy and kind of a model of this to sort of understand this. And this is something that it is just an analogy. One of the things about the Catholic approach to the world and to knowledge is that we understand that all of our knowledge is analogic in some way. We can describe something using words, but the words are not the reality. They share something with the reality. And so as you then use the words to describe images where the images have some relationship or some similarity to the reality that you're trying to sort of get across, it breaks down. So I want to just warn everybody listening to this podcast not to use the analogy against itself. That doesn't really work because this is just an analogy. So if you picture, for example, let's say a room, and a nice, beautiful room with white walls and maybe colorful pictures of maybe the white is God and colorful, it could be colorful pictures or not. I like to think of it as white, and I'll tell you why in a minute. So that you've got this white room, and suspended from the room on this, say, string or cable or something, and it's a fairly big room, is this big ball. And don't worry about what the ball's made of yet. We'll get to that. So this big ball. Now the string suspending the ball is is God's act of creation. The room itself is eternity, and the walls constructing the room are eternity, and the God, there's the configuration of the walls themselves is God. So
Okay.
So God is in eternity, and from eternity he's got this string, which is his act of creation, suspending this ball in the room, and the ball is all of time from the beginning to the end. The very center of the ball is, say, for example, the beginning of time, and the outside of the ball is the end of time. And so if you could think of space, now we have a three-dimensional space, but if you can kind of use your imagination and think of compressing the three-dimensional space into like a two-dimensional space, like a surface, like everything, the entire state of the universe, the whole universe through all of space, and all the atoms and everything that are in space and all the stars and the planets and everything that individual people are doing and so on and so forth, for one instant of time, that represents a layer, a spherical layer, say, going outward in time. So as you go outward, you're going further and further in time, and each layer, successive outward layer of this ball is the new state of the universe. And of course there are an infinite number of them. And so now think of the ball, and those those lampshades you can get for rooms that kind of, that you have a light bulb and then over it is kind of like a dome thing, and then in the lampshade is, say, like mostly black or some kind of opaque glass or material, but then they've got these little kind of pictures of stained glass or just plastic or cellophane or something of different colors in it, so that when you turn the light on in a dark room, they shine out and they project these images on the walls.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Okay, well, that's kind of, the ball is kind of like that. And the images being projected out onto the walls of eternity, that's our souls, as we, having died and having gone through either purgatory or whatever it is we go through until the end of time, we now leave time and enter eternity. And so that's, so in order to get there to eternity, our individual consciousnesses, our soul with a body, our nature, because we're by nature a union of soul and body, had to travel through time from whatever point in that time we were created. We weren't all necessarily created in the middle of the ball. We kind of came to being, at various points in this ball, but we had to travel through that outward until we reached the edge, and then we suddenly are in eternity. And that's our experience of it, is traveling through that ball and reaching eternity. But the room itself just shows it all the time. It's not like from the point of view of the room itself, you're not aware of individual photons moving through and then reaching. The room itself, it's just constant. It's one picture. It's a tableau. Okay. And so that's kind of what God's creation of time is, except when he created time, or as he creates time, this time that he creates is already a time, a sequence, a arrangement of natural laws and mechanisms that follow from them, and in some cases interruptions of those mechanisms for miraculous purposes, for example, that accounts for all of our prayers and all of our supplications and all of our struggles and everything that we hand over to him to help us through. All of that's already part of that picture from this point of view of eternity, because he's the structure of the wall itself and the existence of this ball of time itself. and he's already accounting for that as it's developed in this one singular eternal act of creation. Now, one of the things that you may be wondering about, well, what about the souls that don't go to heaven? Okay.
Yeah.
So my thinking is all right. So imagine that this room has a floor that is just completely black. Okay. So our purpose is to try to get, to heaven, not merely to eternity. Everybody gets to eternity. And everybody has an eternal existence. But if you have grace, that puts you on a trajectory in this sphere of time where when you exit in the upper half of the ball and you reach God, and your projection onto the wall of eternity is with God. If you don't, then you're in the lower half of the ball and your projection is onto the floor, or in some part of the ball where your projection is onto the floor, and the floor is just painted black.
Okay.
And so you don't get to see God. You don't get to experience God. You still continue to exist. You don't get to just disappear and stop being. But what you do is as you hit black, you're absorbed into that, and even though you still exist, you also kind of raise the temperature a little bit, and that's kind of my very crude analogy for hell. Then is all the
like
people
fuel for the fire,
because that's right. So, so that's the kind of I guess a cutesy part of the analogy. But the thing is, there are people who are going to go to hell. In fact, lots of people who are going to go to hell. In fact, a number of scriptural passages should make us worry and should make us concerned that most people perhaps are going to go to hell. But those that go to heaven, those are the ones who reach the projection of the walls where God is, and therefore they know God as he is. They're right there on the wall with God, but they're not part of the wall. They're not part of God. They're distinct from God, but with God.
Okay.
And so that's kind of our entry into the beatific vision. Now, you asked the question, okay, well, what about after we die, after the end of the world? Is it going to, still be time? Are we going to get to experience, that kind of unfolding that we seem to like so much? It's almost like we're built not just for knowledge itself, but for an unfolding of knowledge or something like that.
Yeah, because I like
experience that in some way. Yeah, that's true. I do too. So now here's the thing: whether there is or is not, whatever model, whatever kind of reality there is in eternity, what we know, absolutely is this: it's going to answer all of our needs and everything that we want. So we say, well, I like time. Whatever it is we like about time, whatever it is inside of us that longs for that, it's going to be satisfied in heaven in some way. But maybe we like time because time is really something that we're destined for. Maybe. So here's where I say, okay, we know that God is infinite. Okay, even though he's like singular, the eternal now, just everything together all at once, he's also infinite in being that. And so this room doesn't need to just be a room. It can be a hallway, maybe like a domed hallway or something that stretches forever. And it could be that then, or it could be a hallway that stretches upward forever, like a shaft, for example, that's infinite. And nonetheless, this ball of time hanging, and those who enter heaven, who end up projected onto the walls, especially, white walls, they reflect. I mean, they don't reflect images as images, but they reflect light back out. That's what makes them white. So it could be that so we've got this initial ball of time, but it could be that there's like an extension of it that raises up through the shaft. So the ball maybe doesn't continue growing. It's not like infinitely big growing outward, but some part of it grows upward through the shaft, representing ongoing time where, from some point the whole universe is transformed. Jesus said, I make, in Revelations, behold, I make all things new again. And Revelation talks about a new heaven and a new earth coming down. So here's where maybe that's when our bodies are raised into their glorified state, maybe they're glorified into this either continuation of or this new order of time that goes in perpetuity, that goes forever. But when we're there, because we've also gone through this entry into the beatific vision, this entry into seeing God as He is, and this union with God.
Yeah.
So we retain that, and we retain our conscious awareness of that as we're going through time. So this time, we're not. It's not like we're capable of sinning or something like that, because we're in this vision, kind of in this awareness of the vision of God that simply won't allow us to offend Him. To offend Him would be to offend ourselves at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And so we continue to be aware of that, but at the same time, we get to, I think perhaps, experience sequence and interactions and stuff like that, stuff that in some measure represents change as we go through the eternal perpetuity of this new earth, this new order of time. So that's kind of my thought, and that's my I guess my analogy, the image that I would propose for people to kind of, anybody who struggles with this idea that, okay, wait a minute, God is infinite and He doesn't have a beginning or an end. So, what was before the creation of the universe?
Yeah,
well, that's the picture I would put it. And in fact, the beautiful thing about that is that, and here's where the concept of the predestination comes in. From an eternal point of view, it's this one single tableau. We who right now are struggling, we're kind of working our way through time to try to come out on the right side and make sure that we get on the right side of eternity and that we're with God, and we don't end up suffering hell for all eternity. We're already there for those of us who are going to be there, and championing ourselves on.
What if we're our own guardian angels?
Well, that's a cute idea, but actually that would not be possible, because angels are theologically necessarily distinct from dead humans. So, for example,
right. We talked about that.
Yeah, stories like, what was that story with Michael Landon about the angel that I think he was? No, he wasn't necessarily.
Highway to Heaven.
Highway to Heaven. Was he a dead person, or was he just a true angel? Did you lose me for a minute?
You know what happened? Okay, what happened is that there's a car outside that steals my Bluetooth and steals
So
everything, whether I want it to or not. Yeah.
It's connected.
Yeah, and it was like I lost you because whatever you were saying was probably being broadcast in the car
over there.
And okay. But we're back now.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. No, I was just saying that. What was I saying? We just talked
I think
about
we got it all.
Highway to Heaven. I was asking.
Okay. Highway to
I don't
Heaven.
remember whether he's a true angel.
He's supposed to be an angel.
Okay, so
he is not a dead human.
The one that gets it wrong is It's a Wonderful Life. That angel is supposed to be a dead person.
Yeah.
Okay, but that's not what angels are, so that movie theologically is incorrect.
What do you expect from Hollywood?
Yeah. Okay, by the way, it's kind of interesting that that's like one of the most watched Christmas movies.
Yeah.
That is one of the very few movies produced by Hollywood and in the public domain. There's no copyright on it.
I did not know there's no copyright.
The copyright to it was given up because it was considered such a complete failure and flop as a movie.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
Kind of funny.
I did not know that.
Yeah. Anyway. So, so what does this mean? I mean, it's kind of nice to think about these lofty things, and it's to me, it was really nice to suddenly have that kind of conceptual clarity that I had struggled with. I would say up until about, I don't know, 5 or 10 years ago. I mean, this was something that I continued to struggle with until really late in my life. For some reason, there was a mental block. I just didn't get it. But
yeah.
What does this mean in like real terms right now? Well, one of the things that kind of, and I didn't explain why this was a bad way of thinking about it in the immediate conversation. But I was talking with somebody about God, and he said, yeah, I think, God, I believe in God, but I think he's kind of lost interest in things. And so he's kind of just let things go. And
okay.
So, and see, obviously he's coming from this point of view of, okay, you've got time, and then you've got God inside of time, and then God creates a universe and sets it going inside of time, and then forgets about it or loses interest and goes away. The universe keeps going, but God's, not paying attention to it anymore. Well, that's when you understand the nature of this relationship between God and creation, the idea that all of creation from start to end is a singular act of God from eternity, and that the whole thing is intricately and specifically created by God, you can't support that point of view anymore. If you imagine, for example, let's say a man's drawing a horse, on a blank wall or a blank piece of paper or whatever, it doesn't matter. The thing is, the blank paper or the blank wall, think of that as representing nothingness, okay? And then the details of the horse as he's drawing it, the strokes of the pencil or the paint, the brush with the paint, whatever it is that makes up the image, that is the arrangement of time and space and matter and so forth, progressing through, to create the completion of the universe. And so, if the horse's nose maybe is the beginning of the time, and his tail, if it's a galloping horse, kind of, flying out the end of his tail is the end of time, whatever. It doesn't matter how you think of it, but the point is, if the artist gets to a certain point of painting or drawing this horse and then loses interest, well, the horse, that's all there is to the horse. There isn't any more. If he loses interest before he gets to the saddle or to the forelegs, there's no saddle. There's no forelegs. There's the part of the horse he drew is all there is. The horse isn't going to keep drawing itself just because the artist started it. Well, that's kind of the way time is with God. If God had lost interest in the universe at some point in time, none of the other points in time would exist.
Well, it's kind of the idea that God's creation, what he did was set up these laws with matter and space and time, and went ahead and just kind of blew them into motion. So, like the Big Bang, and just kind of sat back and watched the rest.
Right.
That's what he's describing.
Right.
Is
exactly. But the problem with that is that model can only work if God himself is inside of time. That model doesn't work if God is creating time.
Yeah, because he's not.
Right?
But it could still work if he's creates time, creates everything, and then decides to allow it all to happen without any more interaction from him.
Yeah, but the only way that it happens without interaction, see, that's the thing. It's like, in order for the time itself to exist, he has to create that moment in time. You see what I mean?
He has to continue to create.
Yeah, it's like, okay, if he, when he does his act of creation from outside of time, he has to explicitly create all the time that he's going to allow for. If he creates 8 billion years worth of time, that means time stops after 8 billion years, and after 8 billion years, things cease to exist. If he creates 30 billion years worth of time, then that's what he created. If he created 2,000 years worth of time, that's all we would have.
Okay.
So, and then of course, doing it from from eternity, it's not like he can watch it, because by the mere act of creating it, it's already filled. And
it's already been done.
There's nothing to watch. Right?
Yeah.
So that's but that's something people who feel like, well, people who maybe had a spiritual sense of, of a caring creator, and somehow have been led to lose that, to think, well, God doesn't care anymore. Mm-hmm. Maybe somebody thinks, well, I used to believe in God, but he's probably there, but he doesn't really have any use for me. I don't have any use for him. Well, I know that philosophy doesn't, I guess, answer spiritual needs like that.
Right.
But it is something that I can put out there and say, hey, that's a completely, it's certainly understandable for some people to feel that way, but that's just a feeling. If you were to step back and look at it, there's no way to support that kind of a understanding of God.
No way for that to happen.
The fact that you're here now means He cares about you here now, and that kind of leads me into the another thought. Last week we talked about animals and animal rights, and we talked about it more from a human relation to animals kind of a thing, and what we can learn from animals about, for example, the the sentiments of God, the will of God towards us. But there's something else that we can take from that, and if we look at it as, all of creation, the entire act of creation as a singular act by God from eternity, every single detail of that is attended to in that act. That also means that God had a plan, or has a plan, for how creation is going to work. And this includes, obviously, things growing and things dying and seeds falling. It includes, predators and prey among animals, and so on and so forth. But it also includes things like the, for example, we like to go camping once a year at the Red River Gorge in Kentucky, and we see some really magnificent views there. The ridges of the hills and the exposed rock faces and different things like that, or people who visit the Grand Canyon, or the really kind of almost bright green emerald fields and hills in, say, Ireland, and so forth, or mountains that in Colorado and whatever. The thing is, all of these things are there, and they're some kind of echo of God's glory. The fact that we can respond to them, that we can have that kind of sense of awe about them, shows that God intended them as a means of showing us in some small way His glory, that He intended us to receive that from them.
Yeah.
Now, there's certainly lots of stuff that, His glory is in the fact that we have trees that we can cut down and cut into boards and use and build houses. Okay, that's part of His glory too.
Right.
But I think that as we look at this, there's a it's kind of funny that there's almost a approach to environmental concerns that would lead us to say, okay, it's not that we should worship, for example, the environment, but we should be taking care to see that things continue to work as God intended them to work.
Okay.
Or as God set them up to work. I mean, he planned out the entire universe, and he created the species of animals. He created the existence and reality in both the life-giving and destructive properties of water. He created gravity. He created sunlight, all that kind of stuff. Not just here on Earth, but perhaps we may find on other planets as well. And he created them all, to each one serving its purpose or multiple purposes within this kind of balanced world that allows us, his eternal creations. We're the ones made in his image and likeness who are going to then continue our existence into eternity, to continue to grow and to produce, to generate more of us, for the purpose of bringing our children to him and raising them according to his plan so that they can experience eternity as well.
Yeah.
And so in the service of that goal, we should also be making sure that things continue to operate correctly. And whether that means taking care to make sure we don't make, industrial cities into smog centers.
Right.
Or, for example, making sure that, I think, we've talked about this, and we both agree that one of the legitimate roles, say, of government, I mean, we're both kind of limited government, in our philosophy, but one of the legitimate roles of government, I think we've agreed, is to allocate and set aside certain areas to be preserved,
like parks,
for common use. Yeah, exactly.
Well, I think that's a good introduction to what we're probably maybe getting more to next week.
Mm-hmm.
Because I did want to talk a little bit about environmentalism.
Okay.
But we're like an hour into it, so.
Oh yeah. So yeah, that's true. And even not just environment, but biological environment. So when we look, for example, at living things, we see even in the Bible, it kind of hints at this, each producing offspring according to its own kind. Well, we find that echoed, or we find that to be an echo of our teaching about the relationship of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. So we say the Son is eternally begotten of the Father. And whereas an animal an animal produces an offspring that is of the same kind, but they're not the same animal.
Right.
But the Father produces a son, or rather begets a son, that is not just of the same kind, but of the same substance. Even though the Father in his personhood begets eternally the Son in his personhood, they are the same substance, the same divine being. And then the two of them in their personhood produce, or from them proceeds the Holy Spirit. So when we engage in our care of living things, but a farmer who grows corn or grows wheat or grows soy or whatever, cotton, whatever. But the thing is, we're growing things. Now we grow things because we need them to consume and eat and so on and so forth, which is all according to God's plan. But we're also glorifying God because that's an echo of God's own internal reality. The same thing, of course, when we raise animals. So there's a, now, most people who are involved in this, they're so concerned about the day to day. They don't go out each morning and say, okay, let me go glorify God while I plow this field or whatever. That's not generally how they think it. But my point is that the way God set this up, the very ordering of our lives that we've happened into as humans, glorifies him, because we rely on this ongoing generation of living things, and we count on things producing things of the same kind. So that's just kind of an extension of this, that in this singular eternal act of creation, that God has poured so much of himself by reflection and by analogy into the way creation itself is ordered. I think that itself is something that we ought to continuously be amazed at.
Right. Okay. I don't have any questions to that.
That's about it. Yeah.
That's about it. It's a lot to
the
chew.
End of my sermon.
But I might come up with some questions about it next week.
Yeah, it's one of those. Okay. It's a deep thing. It begs some questions. There's one aspect of this that I haven't addressed, which is the incarnation. So it's like this there's this part of God that is projected like a piece of the wall itself, because if the wall, the structure of the wall is God, so there's this piece of the wall itself that is projected into this ball, because the ball is all of time. And then that same piece is matched by a projection of light back onto the wall, but in some way that it matches the projection, because Christ has, he is the person of the Holy Trinity. He, in his divinity, entered into time and took on human nature, and now he has a human soul, which would also project back out of this sphere as one of these shafts of light on the wall. Yeah. So I don't know, like it gets kind of weird, because, then you're if you think of the wall and the structure and this, and the structure is God, and so you think of this, like kind of an image of a man or something like that, and then there's this if Christ is the Logos, the knowledge of God, so this from the brain projecting into the sphere, well, then it starts to look like a brain tumor, and it gets kind of goofy looking and stuff. Yeah. So, you don't want to go too far with it, but the thing is, it's just an analogy. Don't take it too far.
Okay. Well, I think we're going to move to current events.
All right, let's do it.
A lot going on, but I think the big thing right now is that first Trump told everyone Mexico will pay for that wall. And everybody said, you're nuts. He's not going to pay for the wall. They're not going to pay for the wall. And then all of a sudden,
Mexico.
Yeah. Then he says,
Mexico's going to pay for it. Yep, I'm going to make them pay.
Then suddenly there's this tariff he starts talking about, which everyone's against, and everybody's going crazy over. But he says, no, we're going to tariff. It started with 5%. It was going to go up to 25%. And the only way they could get out of it was to stop these caravans.
Migrants from coming through. Yeah. The caravans.
And guess what happened? The Mexicans they're going to send 6,000 troops down to their southern borders, and they are going to arrest these people coming up from Honduras and all the other bad places down there.
The sub-Mexican Central American, yeah.
So
finally, they're going to take responsibility for their southern border.
And they are going to compensate for Congress's lack of action in stopping these people from coming to America and invading.
Yeah, shameful that it came to that. Right. We should. I mean, okay, Mexico all along should have been controlling it on that level.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, we should also have our border in order already. It shouldn't be. We shouldn't be at this point. But here's the thing. When I think about that, what do you think those Mexican troops are going to do at their border? Do you think that they're going to,
they're not going to treat them the way we do?
For the most part, yeah. We arrest, we put them in housing, we put it, and I don't know, we get so many thousands coming in every month. I don't know. I can't imagine that we're not just releasing like thousands and thousands of them every month anyway, who are, turning probably right around and coming back. I don't know.
Yeah.
But the thing is, you don't think the Mexican troops are going to do that? No. They're going to shoot.
They're going to shoot, or they're going to just
stay
turn
on your
them back.
side. Stay
Don't
on
come
your
over
side,
here.
and we'll shoot you. Yeah, exactly. Or whatever. But here's the thing. So all of these people that are like cheering on these migrant caravans from these Latin American countries through Mexico, now that Mexico is actually exercising responsibility for their southern border, these people, by cheering on these caravans, are doing a real disservice to those people. I mean, they're basically encouraging actions that are going to get these people killed.
Yeah. And they were all along, but now
if
more so.
If you're concerned, don't encourage people to leave their country and then, travel to another country illegally and then just storm that other country and start demanding to participate in, a way of life or whatever. Especially when they, probably wouldn't really participate. Instead,
they don't.
If you're so concerned, go teach those people how to establish their own ways of life.
Fix their own countries.
These Latin American countries are super rich in natural resources. There is no reason for them to be poor. They're poor because they have
bad governments.
And usually either socialist or quasi-socialist or some kind of totalitarian government. Yeah. They're poor because they don't have capitalism, is what it boils down to.
Right.
That's now somehow, obviously it's not like you can flip some kind of a switch. There's got to be development and so on and so forth. But that's what Christian missionaries have done. In addition to preaching the gospel, they've built schools and they've taught the physical subjects, and they've taught communications, which is extremely important.
In a lot of these cases,
reading and writing.
Probably going to take some sort of civil war or revolution to get these things started, but that's what happened in America. So,
but when those do happen, let's not support the communist ones. Let's I mean, there have been a few revolutions down there in the past, and America seems to always get on the communist side,
on the wrong side.
And it becomes a big embarrassment. So anyway,
speaking of in places like Honduras, there's these huge mass anti-government protests in Honduras where they're burning down U.S. embassies.
Huh. Okay, so let's burn down the U.S. embassy because the United States is so evil that...
Because we didn't want them up here, basically.
That we want... Yeah, well, that's the point. I mean, the United States is so evil that's where we want to go.
Yeah. If we're that bad, then why do they want to come here anyway?
Exactly.
It's crazy.
But it shows you that this is not just... Here's the thing. It shows you this is not just regular people who are going about their lives and then deciding that they need to do. These are people.
These are activists.
Well, they're not just activists. That they're people. I mean, the extremely poor people who are forming these caravans or burning these embassies or whatever. They're people who are being manipulated. These are people who are in some manner by some group being led to do these things. This isn't just coming up from a grassroots kind of a thing,
right?
And that's I think there's people who think that this is just grassroots. It isn't. These people are being pushed this way by somebody. I'm probably it would be easy enough to find out who and which groups and so on and so forth.
I think there's a number of groups. I think we've investigated these things, and like, for example, the Venezuelan government was funding some of these caravans. So was the Mexican cartel.
Mm-hmm. The Mexican cartels would love these people to flood into our country because those are the mules. These
are anti-American organizations that are pushing these caravans. So it is what I mean. It's got to be stopped. Trump's the first person to stop it.
Right.
Obama, if you will remember, he did, quote, try to stop it. You remember he talked about, well, he was the one who set up all those cages. Where they take the pictures of the kids in the cages and the parents being separated. That was all him.
Yeah.
You know, so, well, anyway, that's what's happening. So I guess there was question of Governor Larry Hogan was going to run for president to challenge Trump, and he has decided he will not. And then there's another guy named Bill Weld who might challenge Trump for the 2020 president
for the Republican nomination.
Yeah, but
okay.
I don't know. It's silly.
What state's he
gonna. I don't know where Bill Weld is from. Larry Hogan is Maryland.
Okay.
But nobody's gonna be Trump, so it doesn't matter.
No.
So knock it off.
You don't.
And we don't want
Trump.
anyone. Yeah, why don't you just be on his team? Why not be on the winning team? We're finally winning.
And the thing is,
be a part of it.
Winning at the right stuff. That's the thing.
Yeah, we're beating the bad things. I don't know. It's crazy that our politicians are so. I don't even know what drives them anymore. Because I think about. You can look at what's happening and you can know that we're in the right. It just thinks about abortion. You know we're in the right here. History will look back on these days. What do you want them to see? Someone who opposed the guy who was doing what's right and who had to be beaten down? Do you want to be one of those guys who had to be beaten? Or do you want to be part of the winning team who rearranged things or arranged things again the way they're supposed to be?
Right.
Okay, did you see the video of Nancy Pelosi that was kind of doctored and made it look like she was drunk and slurred speech, stuff like that? I didn't even see it. I don't
watch
excerpts.
Videos.
Right.
If when I see things on the internet, if they're not written down, I tend not to even bother because I don't have time. I can read in 20 seconds what it takes 3 minutes to come across in a video.
Yeah.
And I just don't have the time, so I don't watch videos. But go ahead and explain what happened.
Well, I
saw reference to it.
A guy had used had doctored a video to make it look like Pelosi was drunk and not and slurring her speech and stuff like that.
So it's just a guy having fun, or did he?
That's what it ended up being. Well, he put it out there. But he was from the Bronx, and he was just having fun, and he didn't. He didn't
put it out there as he didn't claim it was a real video or anything like that.
I think he kind of did, with the assumption that everybody would know. I mean,
that's what I mean.
It's obviously a doctored video, but the Daily Beast identified him, and for what I understand, they used some illegal means to get a hold of this guy's identification, then outed him, and so that poor guy. I think he's an African American he's a black guy in the Bronx.
Man.
But he's getting all kinds of heck.
Well, let's pray for him and raise a glass to him.
Yeah, he's just having fun.
He's just having fun. I mean, okay,
yeah.
It's like, that's no different than the spineless bush bubble video games or the stupid, talk about infantile, the Trump baby balloon thing they had in Britain.
It was retarded.
Okay, those are a bunch of infantile retards.
Mm-hmm.
This guy was.
He's just having some fun.
Just having fun. Yeah, that's okay. So, well, whoever he is, sorry to. Sorry we're so stupid about it and treat you so badly. Don't have any sense of humor.
Yeah. United States announces new restrictions on American travel to Cuba, effective Wednesday.
Okay. Now, had we lifted restrictions since
I think that's what had happened. Yeah, I think Obama lifted all kinds of restrictions.
Oh,
as a matter of fact, it's my understanding that Cuban cigars aren't even illegal anymore.
I think so. Right.
I might be wrong about that, but it's my understanding that Obama lifted all kinds of things, and now I think we're inserting these restrictions.
Okay.
So, let's see. Okay, the Scot Peterson is was the officer that was present at the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School shooting. He was the one who stayed outside and set up a perimeter instead of going in and getting the bad guy, even though he was armed. He's been arrested for failing to act.
Okay.
So he was there, and he from everything we can tell, it was an act of cowardice. He just didn't want to go up against the shooter. That's what it looks like. Can't say for sure. I guess he's going to be arrested and charged, and then we'll see what happens.
So, okay, but is this just a case of name overlap? Are you sure it's Scot Peterson?
Scot Peterson is what it's reported.
Because Scot Peterson,
you mean
you remember Lacey Peterson?
No.
Lacey Peterson, I think, was the one who was basically like disappeared, and they couldn't find her, but they finally convicted her husband of murdering her.
I think that's probably just they happen to have the same name. No, I don't.
This was a huge story too. That would be so weird if his name is the same. Okay, so
now this is just some guy who was supposed to protect kids, who was there to protect kids.
Which shooting was it? Oh, 1T Scott. Okay.
Okay, this is a guy in Parkland, Florida. There was that shooting. It was like less than a year ago. And remember, they turned it into a great big political thing. That's that kid came out of that. I can't remember his name, but he was in all the news. He was like an 18-year-old kid who became this big liberal activist. But there was a deputy there at the school, and when the shooting started, instead of going in, he set up a perimeter. He put blockers to and stationed himself outside the school while the shooting was happening. And I think even other officers showed up, and he directed them to not go in.
Okay.
And that is not part of his training. He had been trained in active shooter situations, and his training was not to stay outside and set up a perimeter.
It was to go in.
Right. So, it looks like it was an act of cowardice, and he's been arrested now for that act. Yeah. And I guess we'll see what happens in the trial.
Right. Now, there is one... the trial can be, against his training and what he was supposed to do and that kind of stuff. There's a quote from Eugene O'Donnell, fellow professor at John Jay College of Criminal Justice, also a former New York police officer, and he says, which on its face it sounds pretty reasonable, but I'd have to learn a little bit more about it. And honestly, I'm not a policeman. And I'm not I've never been in the military, so there's a lot here that I just don't know in terms of direct understanding. But he has this quote: criminalizing someone for not acting in the middle of a mass murder is built on the preposterous notion that police officers are Navy SEALs in disguise and can spring into action. You never know what you're going to do when the bullets start flying.
Well, another thing.
There's a certain way that sounds reasonable to me, but I don't know.
There was a case in the Supreme Court about police officers who did not act to save someone from something, and the Supreme Court found that police officers are not bound to save someone who is in trouble. It is not a crime for them not to act. Right. Mm-hmm. So I think he has a case.
Yeah. Okay.
But then again, there might be state laws.
I mean, it's one of those things
or
that
even city laws.
You don't call him a hero. And hold up as an exemplar the guy who does act and who does put himself in danger and so forth.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, you know, there is a reasonable expectation, a certain level of, you know, that we hold our police officers to, or you know,
they have oaths that they
put
take.
themselves between danger and us as normal citizens. I mean, we give them certain privileges. We say, hey, okay, if you direct us to do things, we've got to do them. That, you know, a direct order, we've got to follow, even though it may be an illegal order. Okay, if you're telling me to do something illegal, obviously I can't. But if you say I have to go to that side of the street, I have to go to that side of the street. You're a police officer. I've got to do what you say. We give you those privileges,
and you get to carry a gun around, and you get to
carry a gun, and so on and so.
You get free drinks at UDF. And,
in exchange, we expect you to put yourself in the line of danger between danger and us, and especially our kids. You know, there's however it pans out in terms of a legal trial. I think that there's at least also a very solid reasonableness that morally he should have been expected to step up.
Definitely. And well, we don't know what's going to happen, but I mean, his name has now been, I mean, people know his name now.
Right.
So it's like, obviously he's never going to be in law enforcement again. He's probably going to have a tough time finding another job for a while.
Right.
Until people forget the name. But, so he's been arrested. I think he's out on bail now. But now, speaking of shootings, Ralph Northam, that governor in Virginia, is calling a special session on gun control. This is after that shooting in Virginia Beach.
Oh, right.
I think he killed 12 people. We talked about it last week, I think. But he's going to call a special session to talk about gun control, which, the thing is, this is Virginia. There's a lot of good old boys in Virginia. But the problem is that it's also right south of Washington, D.C. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people in Virginia are government people who are establishment people, I guess you would say, you know? And they're people who would go for that. So I don't know if he's going to pass some laws or what, but we'll see. YouTube is calling a new policy regarding hate speech. I guess, things like neo-Nazis and... Mm-hmm. But I don't know what that's going to... See, they subsequently suspending several popular right-wing channels. Why is neo-Nazis right-wing? I don't get that because I don't know anyone on the right who is a neo-Nazi. And I haven't heard any neo-Nazi or white supremacist content that sounds in any way right-wing.
No.
They don't believe anything that we believe.
That's the I guess one of the wins of the left or whoever that they could.
They get to define these terms, and it's like, come on, you're just going to label me
this way? Exactly.
Give me a break.
It's like, okay, wait a minute. So on the right, we have limited government and individual accountability and freedom and deregulation and non-totalitarianism and
and if they're neo-Nazis, then they believe in totalitarianism.
Exactly. On the left, that's where we have government regulation and totalitarianism and lockstep with centrally defined culture and so on and so on and so on.
Yeah.
Nazis is left wing, not right wing. And in fact, on that scale, Islamist Sharia law is left wing, not right wing.
Yeah.
Although that actually the left accepts that because the left they're in some kind of weird love affair with Muslims right now. Anyway.
It's weird.
I kind of don't get.
It's
but
odd.
Anyway. Yeah.
Okay. Big news of the day. So NASA has its plans to commercialize the International Space Station.
Okay.
They are focusing their attention on putting another man and the first woman on the moon by 2024. Now, Trump tweeted about this. I saw the tweet. He's like, why are you guys focused on the moon? We've already been to the moon. Do something new.
Yeah. Go to Mars.
Yeah, so now we got to put a woman on the moon. A big deal.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah, like that's different than putting a man on the moon.
Yeah, okay. So, but the International Space Station is supposed to be, it's reaching the end of its life, or its expected life, what it was built for. And so they are they're focusing their resources on the moon landing and commercializing the ISS, so that I think it would be like $58 million to go there.
So so when you say commercializing, you literally mean commercializing, not just privatizing. They're like
they're talking about that and doing things that you can only do in space, but I don't know what any of those things are. Certain manufacturing that would happen up there and things like that. But I don't know of anything that can happen in space that can't happen here. I wonder if they're going to be like collecting souvenirs.
Well,
I don't know.
But I guess I know that there, outside, when you take gravity away, there's certain things that you can do in terms of materials and in terms of material handling and mixing and that kind of stuff to be able to do those things just on the space station on a scale that would count as manufacturing, that doesn't seem. I mean, prototyping maybe, but to do actually a manufacturing interest in space, that's where you'd be better off. I don't know, setting up a base on the moon and doing it in 1/6 gravity,
low gravity,
or something like that. So
yeah.
All right.
So,
well,
that's it for me.
I think there's probably maybe a little bit more to be learned on the moon, and maybe we, who knows? Maybe the moon could be a viable base station for trips to other planets or something like that. So I don't 100% agree with Trump that they should, ignore the moon and do something different. But at the same time, to focus specifically on a woman as a achievement, that's stupid.
It is dumb.
Okay. All right. I've got 2 items from the Nation of Nonsense.
Okay.
One of them is in Canada. This kid was caught driving like 105 miles an hour. Of course, it's Canadian, so the actual speed was in kilometers per hour. It's like 170 kilometers an hour. But it works out to 105 miles an hour. He was stopped by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. I don't know how mounted police...
Mounted?
It puts
These
an image in
Canadians
your
are
head,
dumb.
doesn't it? I know.
Yeah. You couldn't outrun a horse? Moron?
Exactly. Well, that must be some horse if they caught him at 105 miles an hour.
That guy's going to get made fun of the rest of his life.
I guess the
blockade,
Mounties,
I guess.
No, I guess the Mounties don't just ride horses, though. They must have cars these days.
Well.
Anyway, here's the thing, though. The reason for his excuse for going so fast is that he had too many hot wings and he needed to get to a bathroom.
Had to go to the bathroom,
huh? I've never used that as an excuse for speeding.
If they're using Mounties, then he's close to the woods. He could have just pulled over and gone into the woods.
Go ahead. I mean,
I had to go to the bathroom.
Well, go right there.
Sometimes if I'm speeding and I see a cop, and I immediately start thinking of excuses of why I was speeding. And I guess I could see me trying that one.
Oh, okay.
I had to go to the bathroom. About to pee my pants.
Yeah, and you just made it worse, officer.
Yeah, thanks. Now I gotta go in the car.
Once I got pulled over for speeding, and it was out in the country, and he's like, but it was one of those stupid ones where the speed limit's like 40, even though it's like a, just you can see for miles country road that should have been 55 or whatever. Anyway, and he pulled me over, and I said, yeah, I'm sorry. I just, it's open road. It just kind of took me, I just gave that excuse, and he said, well, okay, well, watch your speed from now on. He let me go.
I never make it. Actually, I never actually make excuses once I get caught. I just sit there. Yeah, I was speeding. Yeah, I ran a stoplight. Yeah, give me the ticket. Come on, I gotta go.
All right, the other one. So in California, weather stations, they have their radar and stuff. They got confused for a while about what was showing up on radar as a rain cloud, but there was no cloud.
Yeah.
And it turned out that it was a massive cloud of ladybugs measuring 10 miles wide and 15 miles long.
That's a lot of ladybugs.
Yeah, it's called a bloom. I guess they fly at something over 5,000 feet, elevation over 5,000 feet. I would hate to live where that many ladybugs can be in one place.
I think they landed in Cleves like that once.
Did they? Oh,
I came home and I fell asleep on the porch, on the couch, and when I woke up, I thought it was dark because the window was covered. But then another window wasn't covered.
That many, huh?
Yeah, it was terrible.
Gosh.
I was sickened by that many ladybugs. And, I'm trying to think of how to get rid of them. And I actually, not just outside, but inside. I didn't know, they covered the light bulb in one room.
Wow.
They got inside and they covered the light bulb. And I'm like, what do I do? Do I have to wipe them off? And for some reason, I didn't think of using the vacuum cleaner. I actually looked up online what to do about it. And it said, just vacuum it up. And I thought, that was stupid. Why didn't I think of that? I filled up a whole bag.
Oh, man. Oh,
they
that's
had
awful.
attacked me. So,
okay, well, 10 miles by 15 miles. I don't know how deep.
That's terrible. That's an invasive species.
Oh,
I think
where
they're
they
from China. I think
those darn Chinese.
I think
just
we
like
brought
Chinese,
them here.
Like Chinese beetles, huh?
Yeah. Well, we brought them here to eat the aphids.
Oh.
Have you ever seen them eat aphids?
No. I don't know that I've ever seen an aphid. Aphids are like super tiny, aren't they?
Yeah, they're really, really small. But if you find one on a leaf with aphids, you'll see it walk along, and it's almost like vacuuming them up.
No kidding.
Yeah, it's pretty neat.
So, there must be a reason that they're called ladybugs.
I don't know.
Ladies in China or ladies in Japan, I don't know. Maybe there's, mess with them or something.
Yeah, I don't know. I know they stink also. and
maybe that's it.
I have gotten bit by one. I know nobody believes that.
Seriously? I didn't know
I saw one on my arm, and I was just sitting there watching it. I was walking along this country road, and one landed on my arm, and it was just one. And I just sat there watching it, and I was getting ready to flick it, but all of a sudden I felt this really hard sting. And then I flicked it away, but it didn't leave a mark or anything. But
it's just
I don't know.
Maybe it thought it saw an aphid.
Yeah, my arm was an aphid.
All right. Well, that's all I've got.
Okay. Well, that's a lot to think about this week. So, and I think next week we're going to do a little bit about environmentalists and environmentalism.
Let's dig deep into that one.
Yeah. And, but think about what we said and
circle the beads.
And we'll see you next week.
Bye, everyone.